So you introduced the Network Corpus collaborative project I've been working on for the last couple of years as my case study, but I also want to use it as an opportunity for making a case for using digital tools and more seriously thinking about critical method for using digital tools in scholarly research. I think it's important to emphasize the theoretical and critical stakes of using digital tools in scholarly research, in part because the rules of these tools is often treated, I think, as even the title of this event implies, as purely instrumental. Alan Liu has called this the servant function of the digital humanities, observable in attitudes towards activities like text encoding, digital editing, and database building. Yet whether we rely on databases like JSTOR, bibliographic managers like Zotero, or even word processors, we are always using digital tools, and using digital tools has become unavoidable. So I think the question for this panel then is not merely how do we use digital tools, since everyone here is already doing so, but it's also how do we take account for the place of digital tools in our research. Before I attempt to answer that question, I'm going to share my case study, the Network Corpus. It's a project that I developed with my collaborator, Jeff Binder, who, when we began the project, was an English master's student at NYU, and is now as a Ph.D. student at the CUNY Graduate Center. We developed this project in the context of a collaborative exploration of the machine learning method known as topic modeling, conducted by the NYU Digital Experiments Group. Topic modeling generates sets of words that belong to abstract topics based on how those words co-occur in a corpus. We were interested in relating such computer-generated topics to reading practices of marking passages that exhibit shared themes and topics. And I think this little diagram you have of topic modeling store shows how you might make that comparison to manual methods and reading practices. What it illustrates, and I realize it's probably hard to read, but those different colored boxes on the left side are different topics based on how the words co-occur in different documents in a larger corpus. So in that set, the yellow box you have, for example, gene, DNA, genetic, and the pink one you have life, evolve, organism, etc. Right? And I'll sort of explain more what these topics look like as I go on. So we wondered if there was a way to visualize the correlation between earlier genres of topical representation and current computational models of topics. We eventually created the Network Corpus, which visually overlaid a topic model of a text on an HTML version of that text in order to mark where that topics were more highly concentrated within corpus. And here is this first version we developed of a network version of The Spectator by Joseph Addison and Richard Steele. And what you see in the density curve in the middle marks a place of concentration of the particular topic that's been selected, which in the top right you may be able to read says reason, discourse, truth, conversation, method. Right, so this is one topic that was identified in the Spectator corpus, and those words that are highlighted are ones that were marked as belonging to that topic. And this happens to be in the context of talking about different kinds of authority, whether in like law or religion, and how those authority are being marshaled. That's what Addison's discussing here. Our second version of this tool took this comparative approach even further by visualizing a topic model of Adam Smith's The Wealth of Nations in relationship to the 18th century subject index of that text published in 1784. So this was an updated version of that original network corpus with The Wealth of Nations, and here we have a correlation that we constructed between the topic model and the index headings of the text. So for this topic, which you can see on the right, the words are silver, gold, coin, quantity, money, and the index headings that it correlates with are gold and silver, money, coin, gold. Right? And this is based on the pages that are marked by the index heading and the pages that are highly concentrated for this given topic. And so in the process of creating this version of what we call the networked Smith, we realized that our object of inquiry could be sort of further specified. Our attention to the 18th century topical genres had led us to consider the historical evolution of the topic from a rhetorical device for organizing and arranging lines of argument in an oral composition, such as legal or political speeches, to an indexical unit of print genres for organizing any kind of categorical distinction. Scholars of rhetoric and media, such as Walter Ong, John Guillory, and Richard Yeo, have sketched this transformation of the topic from the 16th century with the composition of Erasmus's De Copia through the 18th century with John Locke's A New Method for a Commonplace book in 1706. And also even looking at things like attacks on the rise of index learning in the early 18th century made by writers like Jonathan Swift and Alexander Pope, who argue that this notion of index learning was like trying to master a body of knowledge just by like sort of trying to control fish by grabbing the tail. And as it turned out, our turn to Adam Smith ended up being quite useful and was a perfect place to sort of situate this analysis of the topic as a rhetorical and epistemological device. As a professor of rhetoric and belles lettres, as well as a composer of moral philosophical systems, he represented a place in a moment in history in which these two usages were both attained meaning. Our comparison revealed that the rhetorical and the logical relationships that supported the topics found in The Wealth of Nations contrasted with the topics represented in the model. Because the computational representation only captures the co-occurrence of words, it represents something closer to discursive topics that are places in the text that are characterized by, say, the language of labor, but may not be actually talking about labor. And for understanding and approaching Smith's text, this is really important because he relies on a heavy use of economic analogy. Smith often uses the language of manufacturing or commerce in order to make a point about the economics of agriculture. And as a result, a page that is indexed under farming may appear in a topic that corresponds to manufacturing. This divergence between the model and the index reflect the fact that Smith's system attempted to represent universal concepts of modern political economy, but explain those concepts by using examples from his local commercial context. The British commercial system provides the lens for depicting concepts such as capital, stock, and labor in different historical and geographical contexts. The network Smith, then, this platform that we created, makes visible the friction points between these universal topics and these locally situated explications. And what we were interested in making this comparison, and why I have Quinet's tableau économique there, was drawing out the similar universalizing move made by his index and the topic model as a way of trying to produce a comprehensive view of the entire text. The tableau économique was a representation of an entire circulation of a national economy, and Smith had originally even planned to dedicate The Wealth of Nations to Quinet as a result of sort of the influence of this type of comprehensive system that he developed. Unfortunately, Quinet died, and Smith, I guess, didn't want to dedicate his text to a dead person. But that's too bad. So the transformation of the topic from an oral rhetorical form to a print indexical one helps us, I argue, understand its function in computational models as an epistemological genre that an automated process is capable of recognizing. In the article that introduced the version of topic modeling that we used, also known as latent Dirichlet allocation, or LDA, the authors explain in a footnote that they make no epistemological claims regarding the nature of the topic. The creators of this variety of topic modeling are careful to avoid ascribing any particular kind of semantic significance to the category of the topic. That's partly why they call it topic modeling rather than, say, concept modeling. They want to be agnostic about what topics are, but the fact that the term topic facilitates this kind of agnosticism directly results from the rhetorical and epistemological history of the topic, its movement from this locally rhetorical situated device to a universal print one that could be mobilized in different historical and local contexts. It's the historical, as a result, topic modeling algorithms implicitly rely on this unacknowledged history that corresponds to an earlier moment of media shift from the oral topic to print one in the 18th century. Now I'd like to step back and ask, what does this particular example suggest about how we account for our use of digital tools in the humanities? From this project, I've learned that using digital tools provides a new standpoint from which to conceptualize and represent the contingent histories of literary, epistemological, and medial forms. Accounting for our use of digital tools then means expanding the scope of critical analysis from the thing the digital tool represents or the results that it produces to the way in which it represents or produces them. That is, paying attention to the tool as a medium with a medial and even a literary history. Alan Liu compares this process to holding a microphone up to the faraway past, a way of committing ourselves to hearing the past, but through the conscious election of a media paradigm from a different era. And what I like about this quote especially is because it recalls an earlier moment of electronic technology when someone like Albert Lord was investigating oral poetry by using recordings as a way to understand Homeric epic structure. Right? And I think there's a way in which this digital remediation provides another novel standpoint. In text mining, my specific sort of field of application, and by which I mean quantitative methods used to find patterns in textual corpora, this means not only examining the relation between computational forms and their analog antecedents, but also drawing upon the conceptual apparatus of such methods for reformulating our view of a given object of inquiry. Andrew Piper's recent work on what he calls literary topology, which represents the relationality between multiple texts in a multiple dimensional graphical space, offers a useful example here. His method reflects an attempt to navigate between literary historical concepts and observed quantitative phenomena, an oscillation that he calls scalar reading, in a sense of moving across close and distant perspectives. Unlike a lot of text mining scholarship, Piper's work does not attempt to just test or falsify inherited concepts. Rather, it reformulates those concepts with attention to terms and theories that underpin his digital method. Consider his discussion of language as a vector. A vector represents one way to store natural language as a set of strings or a word table in a computer program so that that program can easily recall subsets of the corpus. But for Piper, this representation of language as a vector also suggests a way of conceiving of, quote, language's instructional function. That is, to understand language in agential terms, what language does as a force that acts on a field. Language as embodying a set of literary rules or protocols that help govern the structure of discursive reality, unquote. So this sort of image of the vector is a way of thinking about how literary influence and lexical influence might circulate within a set of literary texts. The digital method that I'm attempting to sketch here then conceives of the relation between digital tool and the object of inquiry across a historical trajectory and draws us upon the theoretical underpinnings of the tool in order to posit new ways for encountering and interpreting the object of study, ways of encountering it that would not otherwise be available. Taking account of the place of digital tools that they occupy in our research then means allowing the tool to inform how we interpret the textual relations that it makes visible. In the case of the network Smith, this means triangulating the text, the index, and the computational model in order to observe what each view of the text privileges and what it obscures. We are not just relying on the computational capacity to visualize or count text, but also the conceptual and theoretical apparatus that underlies these tools as a way of informing the way we approach these historical data. And my final sort of point on this note is how it draws attention then to the impulse in Smith to attempt to, as Hugh Blair wrote, to exhibit a scientific view of the whole system through his index, to show how it relates to one another, but also to function, in Blair's opinion, as a way of remembering the principles of his text. And I think that also nicely captures that oscillation from the rhetorical mnemonic function of the topic and the indexical visualization principle that it sort of serves. And using that kind of history and highlighting that history through, I think, digital methods offers one way we can sort of approach historical objects of inquiry from a new perspective. And then I'll just conclude by pointing, because I know at some point we'll probably talk about like how other people might get involved in such digital projects. And for me, a major source of this has been the NYU Digital Experiments Group, in which this project grew out of, and which we're also working to sort of hold our different kinds of textual experiments and develop also skill sets for using these kinds of digital tools. And I can talk more of that in Q&A and afterwards, but I think working within a collaborative environment is often really crucial for giving these projects legs to get off the ground. So thank you.